Hello, my name is Adam Hull, and I will be reading Sun Tzu's The Art of War, translated and with an introduction by Samuel B. Griffith, with a foreword by B. H. Liddell Hart. 1. Estimates. Sun Tzu said, "War is a matter of vital importance to the state, the province of life or death, the road to survival or ruin. It is mandatory that it be thoroughly studied. Weapons are tools of ill omen. War is a grave matter. One is apprehensive lest men embark on it without due reflection. Therefore, appraise it in terms of the 5 fundamental factors, and make comparisons of the 7 elements later named, so you may assess its essentials. The first of these factors is moral influence, the second, weather, the third, terrain, the fourth, command, and the fifth, doctrine. The systematic order above is perfectly clear. When troops are raised to chastise transgressors, the temple council first considers the adequacy of the ruler's benevolence. And the confidence of their peoples. Next, the appropriateness of nature's seasons. And finally, the difficulties of the topography. After thorough deliberation of these 3 matters, a general is appointed to launch the attack. After troops have crossed the borders, responsibility for laws and orders devolves upon the general. By moral influence, I mean that which causes the people to be in harmony with their leaders, so that they will accompany them in life and unto death without fear of mortal peril. When one treats people with benevolence, justice, and righteousness, and reposes confidence in them, the army will be united in mind, and all will be happy to serve their leaders. The Book of Changes says, "In happiness at overcoming difficulties, people forget the danger of death." By weather, I mean the interaction of natural forces, the effects of winter's cold and summer's heat, and the conduct of military operations in accordance with the seasons. By terrain, I mean distances, whether the ground is traversed with ease or difficulty, whether it is open or constricted, and the chances of life or death. When employing troops, it is essential to know beforehand the conditions of the terrain. Knowing the distances, one can make use of an indirect or a direct plan. If he knows the degree of ease or difficulty of traversing the ground, he can estimate the advantages of using infantry or cavalry. If he knows where the ground is constricted and where open, he can calculate the size of force appropriate. If he knows where he will give battle, he knows where to concentrate or divide his forces. By command, I mean the general's qualities of wisdom, sincerity, humanity, courage, and strictness. These 5 are the virtues of the general. Hence, the army refers to him as the respected one. If wise, a commander is able to recognize changing circumstances and to act expediently. If sincere, his men will have no doubt of the certainty of reward and punishments. If humane, he loves mankind, sympathizes with others, and appreciates their industry and toil. If courageous, he gains victory by seizing opportunity without hesitation. If strict, his troops are disciplined because they are in awe of him and are afraid of punishment. Shin Pao Shu. If a general is not courageous, he will be unable to conquer doubts or to create great plans. By doctrine, I mean organization, control, assignment of appropriate ranks to officers, regulation of supply routes, and the provision of principal items used by the army. There is no general who has not heard of these 5 matters. Those who master them win. Those who do not are defeated. Therefore, in laying in plans, compare the following elements, appraising them with the utmost care. If you say which ruler possesses moral influence, which commander is the more able, which army obtains the advantages of nature in the terrain, and which regulations and instructions are better carried out, which troops are the stronger, chariots strong, horses fast, troops valiant, weapons sharp, so that when they hear the drums beat the attack they are happy, and when they hear the gong sound the retirement they are enraged. He who is like this is strong. Which has the better trained officers and men? Therefore, Master Wang said, if officers are unaccustomed to rigorous drilling, they will be worried and hesitant in battle. If generals are not thoroughly trained, they will inwardly quail when they face the enemy. And when administers reward and punishments in a more enlightened manner, neither should be excessive. I will be able to forecast which side will be victorious and which will be defeated. If a general who heeds my strategy is employed, he is certain to win. Retain him. When one who refuses to listen to my strategy is employed, he is certain to be defeated. Dismiss him. Having paid heed to the advantages of my plans, the general must create situations which will contribute to their accomplishment. By situations, I mean that he should act expediently, in accordance with what is advantageous, and so control the balance. All warfare is based upon deception. Number 17. All warfare is based upon deception. Therefore, when capable, feign incapacity. When active, inactivity. When near, make it appear that you are far away. When far away, that you are near. Offer the enemy a bait to lure him. Feign disorder to strike him. With their shepherds, when Li Mu released herds of cattle with their shepherds when the Nu had advanced a short distance, he feigned a retirement, leaving behind several thousand men as if abandoning them. When the Khan heard this news, he was delighted, and at the head of a strong force marched to the place. Li Mu put most of his troops into formations on the right and left wings, made horning attack, crushed the Huns, and slaughtered over 100,000 of their horsemen. When he concentrates, prepare against him. Where he is strong, avoid him. Anger his general and confuse him. If the general is choleric, his authority can easily be upset. His character is not firm. If the enemy general is obstinate and prone to anger, insult and enrage him, so that he will be irritated and confused, and without a plan will recklessly advance against you. Pretend inferiority and encourage his arrogance. Toward the end of the Qin dynasty, Mo Tun of the Wang Nu first established his power. The Eastern Hu were strong and sent ambassadors to parley. They said, "We wish to obtain Tao Ma's 1,000 Li horse." Mo Tun consulted his advisers, who all exclaimed, "The 1,000 Li horse, the most precious thing in this country. Do not give them that." Mo Tun replied, "Why begrudge a horse to a neighbor?" So he sent the horse. Shortly after, the Eastern Hu sent envoys who said, "We wish one of the Khan's princesses." Mo Tun asked advice of his ministers, who all angrily said, "The Eastern Hu are unrighteous. Now they even ask for a princess? We implore you attack them." Mo Tun said, "How can one begrudge his neighbor, a young woman?" So he gave the woman. A short time later, the Eastern Hu returned and said, "You have 1,000 li of unused land which we want." Mo Tun consulted his advisers. Some said it would be reasonable to cede the land, others that it would not. Mo Tun was enraged and said, "Land is the foundation of the state. How could one give it away?" All those who had advised doing so were beheaded. Mo Tun then sprang on his horse, ordered that all who remained behind were to be beheaded, and made a surprise attack on the Eastern Hu. The Eastern Hu were contemptuous of him and had made no preparations. When he attacked, he annihilated them. Mo Tun then turned westward and attacked the Yue. To the south, he annexed Lu Fan and invaded Yen. He completely recovered the ancestral lands of the Nu previously conquered by the Qin general Meng Tin. Give the enemy young boys and women to infatuate him, and jades and silks to excite his ambitions. Keep him under a strain and wear him down. When the enemy is at ease, tire him. Toward the end of the later Han, after had defeated Lu Pi, Pei fled Yuan Shao, who then led his troops, intending to engage. One of Yao Shao's staff officers is an expert at employing troops. One cannot go against him heedlessly. Nothing is better than to protract things and keep him at a distance. You, general, should fortify along the mountains and rivers and hold the 4 prefectures. Externally make alliances with powerful leaders. Internally pursue an agro-military policy. Later, select cracked troops and form them into extraordinary units, taking advantage of spots where he is unprepared. Make repeated sorties and disturb the country south of the river. When he comes to aid the right, attack his left. When he goes to succor the left, attack the right. Exhaust him by causing him continually to run about. Now if you reject this victorious strategy and decide to risk it all on one battle, it will be too late for regrets. Yuan Shao did not follow this advice and therefore was defeated. When he is united, divide him. Sometimes drive a wedge between a sovereign and his ministers. On other occasions, separate his allies from him. Make them mutually suspicious so that they drift apart. Then you can plot against them. Attack where he is unprepared. Sally out when he does not expect you. Li Qing of the Tang proposed 10 plans to be used against him, and the entire responsibility of commanding the armies was entrusted to him. In the 8th month he collected his forces at Kwai Chao. As it was the season of the autumn floods, the waters of the Yangtze were overflowing, and the roads by the 3 gorges were perilous. He thought it certain that Li Qing would not advance against him. Consequently, he made no preparations. In the 9th month, Li Qing took command of the troops and addressed them as follows. What is of the greatest importance in a war is extraordinary speed. One cannot afford to neglect opportunity. Now we are concentrated, and Hsao does not yet know of it. Taking advantage of the fact that the river is in flood, we will appear unexpectedly under the walls of his capital. As is said, when the thunderclap comes, there is no time to cover the ears. Even if he should discover us, he cannot on the spur of the moment devise a plan to counter us. And surely we can capture him. He advanced to Ai Ling in Hai Sai, began to be afraid, and summoned reinforcements from south of the river. But these were unable to arrive in time. Li Qing laid siege to the city, and he surrendered. To sally forth where he does not expect you means as when toward its close the Wei dynasty sent generals Cheng Huai and Tang Ai to attack Shu. In winter, in the 10th month, I left Yinping and marched through uninhabited country for over 700 li, chiseling roads through the mountains and building suspension bridges. The mountains were high, the valleys deep, and this task was extremely difficult and dangerous. Also, the army, about to run out of provisions, was on the verge of perishing. Tang Ai wrapped himself in felt carpets and rolled down the steep mountain slopes. Generals and officers clambered up by grasping limbs of trees. Scaling the precipices like strings of fish, the army advanced. Tang A appeared first at Chang Yu and Shu and Ma Mao. The general charged with its defense surrendered. Tang Ai beheaded Chu Ko-chan, who was resisted at Mai Chu, and marched on Chang Tu. The king of Shu, Lu Shan, surrendered. These are the strategist's keys to victory. It is not possible to discuss them beforehand. When confronted by the enemy, respond to changing circumstances and devise expedients. How can these be discussed beforehand? Now, if the estimates made in the temple before hostilities indicate victory, it is because calculations show one's strength to be superior to that of his enemy. If they indicate defeat, it is because calculations show that one is inferior. With many calculations, one can win. With few, one cannot. How much less chance of victory has one who makes none at all? By this means I examine the situation, and the outcome will be clearly apparent. End of chapter 1. Sun Tzu said, "Generally, operations of war require 1,000 fast four-horse chariots, 1,000 four-horse wagons covered in leather, and 100,000 mailed troops." In ancient chariot fighting, leather-covered chariots were both light and heavy. The latter were used for carrying halberds, weapons, military equipment, valuables, and uniforms. The Suma Fa said, "One chariot carries 3 mailed officers. 72-foot troops accompany it. Additionally, there are 10 cooks and servants, 5 men to take care of uniforms, 5 grooms in charge of fodder, and 5 men to collect firewood and draw water. 75 men to 1 light chariot, 25 to 1 baggage wagon, so that taking the 2 together, 100 men can pose a company. When provisions are transported for 1,000 li, expenditures at home and in the field, stipends for the entertainment of advisors and visitors, the cost of materials such as glue and lacquer, and of chariots and armor, will amount to 1,000 pieces of gold a day. After this money is in hand, 100,000 troops may be raised. Now when the army marches abroad, the treasury will be emptied at home. In the army there is a ritual of friendly visits from vassal lords. That is why Sun Tzu mentions advisors and visitors. Victory is the main object in war. If this is long delayed, weapons are blunted and morale depressed. When troops attack cities, their strength will be exhausted. When the army engages in protracted campaigns, the resources of the state will not suffice. The campaigns of the Emperor Wu of the Han dragged on with no result, and after the treasury was emptied, he issued a mournful edict. When your weapons are dulled and ardor dampened, your strength exhausted and treasure spent, neighboring rulers will take advantage of your distress to act, and even though you have wise counselors, none will be able to lay good plans for the future. Thus, while we have heard of blundering swiftness in war, we have not yet seen a clever operation that was prolonged. An attack may lack ingenuity, but it must be delivered with a supernatural speed. For there has never been a protracted war from which a country has benefited. The spring and autumn annals say, "War is like unto fire. Those who will not put aside weapons are themselves consumed by them." Thus, those unable to understand the dangers inherent in employing troops are equally unable to understand the advantageous ways of doing so. Those adept in waging war do not require a second levy of conscripts, nor more than one provisioning. They carry equipment from the homeland. They rely for provisions on the enemy. Thus the army is plentifully provided with food. When a country is impoverished by military operations, it is due to distant transportation. Carriage of supplies for great distance renders the people destitute. If the army had to be supplied with grain over a distance of 1,000 li, the troops would have a hungry look. Where the army is, prices are higher. When prices rise, the wealth of the people is exhausted. When wealth is exhausted, the peasantry will be afflicted with urgent exactions. Where troops are gathered, the price of every commodity goes up because everyone covets the extraordinary profits to be made. With strength thus depleted and wealth consumed, the households in the central plains will be utterly impoverished, and 7/10 of their wealth dissipated. If war drags on without cessation, men and women will resent not being able to marry, and will be distressed by the burdens of transportation. As to government expenditures, those due to broken-down chariots, worn-out horses, armor and helmets, arrows and crossbows, lances, hand and body shields, draft animals, and supply wagons will amount to 60% of the total. Hence, the wise general sees to it that his troops feed on the enemy, for 1 bushel of the enemy's provisions is equivalent to 20 of his. 100 weight of enemy fodder to 20 hundredweight of his. In transporting provisions for a distance of 1,000 li, 20 bushels of consumed in delivering one to the army. 20 bushels will be consumed in delivering one to the army. If difficult terrain must be crossed, even more is required. The reason troops slay the enemy is because they are enraged. When the Yin army surrounded Chi Mo and Chi, they cut off the noses of all the Chai prisoners. The men of Chai were enraged and conducted a desperate defense. Tan sent a secret agent to say, "We are terrified that you people of Yin will exhume the bodies of our ancestors from their graves. How this will freeze our hearts." The Yin army immediately began despoiling the tombs and burning the corpses. The defenders of Chai Mo witnessed this from the city walls, and with tears flowing, wished to go forth to give battle. For rage had multiplied their strength by 10. Tian Tan knew then that his troops were ready, and inflicted a ruinous defeat on Yin. They take booty from the enemy because they desire wealth. In the later Han, Tu, prefect of Qin Chao, attacked Kuai Chao, rebels Pu Yang, Hung, and others. He entered Nan Hai, destroyed 3 of their camps, and captured much treasure. However, Hung and his followers were still strong and numerous, while Tu Sang troops, now rich and arrogant, no longer had the slightest desire to fight. He said, "Pu Yang and Hung have been rebels for 10 years. Both are well versed in attack and defense. What we should really do is unite the strength of the prefectures and then attack them. For the present of the troops shall be encouraged to go hunting." Whereupon the troops both high and low went together to snare game. As soon as they had left, he secretly sent people to burn down their barracks. The treasures they had accumulated were completely destroyed. When the hunters returned, there was not one who did not weep. He said, "The wealth and goods of Pu Yang and those with him are sufficient to enrich several generations. You gentlemen did not do your best. What you have lost is but a small bit of what is there. Why worry about it?" When the troops heard this, they were all enraged and wished to fight. Sang ordered the horses fed and everyone to eat in his bed. And early in the morning they marched on the rebels' camp. Yang and Hung had not made preparations, and Tu's troops made a spirited attack that destroyed them. In this imperial dynasty, when the eminent founder ordered his generals to attack Shu, he decreed, "In all the cities and prefectures taken, you should, in my name, empty the treasuries and public storehouses to entertain the officers and troops. What the state wants is only the land." Therefore, when in chariot fighting more than 10 chariots are captured, reward those who take the first. Replace the enemy's flags and banners with your own. Mix the captured chariots with yours, and mount them. Treat the captives well and care for them. All the soldiers taken must be cared for with magnanimity and sincerity, so that they may be used by us. This is called winning a battle and becoming stronger. Hence, what is essential in war is victory, not prolonged operations. And therefore the general who understands war is the minister of the people's fate and arbiter of the nation's destiny. The difficulties in the appointment of a commander are the same today as they were in ancient times. End of chapter 2. Chapter 3. Offensive Strategy. Sun Tzu said, "Generally in war the best policy is to take a state intact. To ruin it is inferior to this. Do not put a premium on killing. To capture the enemy's army is better than to destroy it. To take intact a battalion, a company, or a 5-man squad is better than to destroy them. For to win 100 victories in 100 battles is not the acme of skill. To subdue the enemy without fighting is the acme of skill. Thus, what is of supreme importance in war is to attack the enemy's strategy." The Grand Duke said, "He who excels at resolving difficulties does so before they arise. He who excels in conquering his enemy's triumphs before threats materialize." Attack plans at their inception in the later Han, Cao Sun, surrounded Cao Chun. Chun sent his planning officer, Fu Wen, to parley. Fu Wen was stubborn and rude, and Cao Sun beheaded him, and informed Cao Chun, "Your staff officer was without propriety. I have beheaded him. If you wish to submit, do so immediately. Otherwise, defend yourself." On the same day, Chun threw open his fortifications and surrendered. All Cao Sun's generals said, "May we ask, you killed his envoy, but yet forced him to surrender his city. How is this?" Cao Sun said, "Fu Wen was Cao Chun's heart and guts, his intimate counselor. If I had spared Fu Wen's life, he would have accomplished his schemes. But when I killed him, Cao Chun lost his guts." It is said, the supreme excellence in war is to attack the enemy's plans. All the generals said, "This is beyond our comprehension." Next best is to disrupt his alliances. Do not allow your enemies to get together. Look into the matter of his alliances and cause them to be severed and dissolved. If an enemy has alliances, the problem is grave and the enemy's position strong. If he has no alliances, the problem is minor and the enemy's position weak. The next best is to attack his army. The Grand Duke said, "He who struggles for victory with naked blades is not a good general. Battles are dangerous affairs. If you cannot nip his plans in the bud or disrupt his alliances when they are about to be consummated, sharpen your weapons to gain the victory." The worst policy is to attack cities. Attack cities only when there is no alternative. To prepare the shielded wagons and make ready the necessary arms and equipment requires at least 3 months to pile up earthen ramps against the walls. An additional 3 months will be needed. If the general is unable to control his impatience and orders his troops to swarm up the wall like ants, 1/3 of them will be killed without taking the city. Such is the calamity of these attacks. In the later way, the Emperor Tai Wu led 100,000 troops to attack the Song general Sang Chai. At Yu Tai, the Emperor first asked Sang Chu for some wine. Chai sealed up a pot full of urine and sent it to him. Tai Wu was transported with rage and immediately attacked the city, ordering his troops to scale the walls and engage in close combat. Corpses piled up to the top of the walls, and after 30 days of this, the dead exceeded half his force. Thus, those skilled in war subdue the enemy's army without battle. They capture his cities without assaulting them, and overthrow his state without protracted operations. They conquer by strategy, and the later Han, the Marquis of San, Sang Kung, surrounded the Yao rebels at Yanwu, but during a succession of months was unable to take the city. His officers and men were ill and covered with ulcers. The king of Tung Hai spoke to Sang Kung, saying, "Now you have massed troops and encircled the enemy, who is determined to fight to the death. This is no strategy. You should lift the siege. Let them know that an escape route is open and that they will flee and disperse. Then any village constable will be able to capture them." Sang Kung followed this advice and took Wanwu. Your aim must be to take all under heaven intact. Thus your troops are not worn out, and your gains will be complete. This is the art of an offensive strategy. Consequently, the art of using troops is this: when 10 to the enemy's 1, surround him. When 5 times his strength, attack him. If my force is 5 times that of the enemy, I alarm him to the front, surprise him to the rear, create an uproar in the east, and strike in the west. If double his strength, divide him. If a 2-to-1 superiority is insufficient to manipulate the situation, we use a distracting force to divide his army. Therefore the Grand Duke said, if one is unable to influence the enemy to divide his forces, he cannot discuss unusual tactics. If equally matched, you may engage him. In these circumstances, only the able general can win. If weaker numerically, be capable of withdrawing. If your troops do not equal his, temporarily avoid his initial onrush. Probably later you can take advantage of a soft spot. Then rouse yourself and seek victory with determined spirit. If the enemy is strong and I am weak, I temporarily withdraw and do not engage. This is the case when the abilities and courage of the generals and the efficiency of troops are equal. If I am in good order and the enemy is in disarray, if I am energetic and he is careless, then, even if he be numerically stronger, I can give battle. And if in all respects unequal, be capable of eluding him, for a small force is but booty for one more powerful. The small certainly cannot equal the large, nor can the weak match the strong, nor the few the many. Now the general is the protector of the state. If this protection is all-embracing, the state will surely be strong. If defective, the state will certainly be weak. The Grand Duke said, a sovereign who obtains the right person prospers. One who fails to do so will be ruined. Now there are 3 ways in which a ruler can bring misfortune upon his army. When ignorant that the army should not advance, to order an advance, or ignorant that it should not retire, to order a retirement. This is described as hobbling the army. The advance and retirement of the army can be controlled by the general in accordance with prevailing circumstances. No evil is greater than commands of the sovereign from the court. When ignorant of military affairs, to participate in their administration. This causes the officers to be perplexed. An army cannot be run according to rules of etiquette. As far as propriety, laws, and decrees are concerned, the army has its own code, which it ordinarily follows. If these are made identical with those used in governing a state, the officers will be bewildered. Benevolence and righteousness may be used to govern a state, but cannot be used to administer an army. Expediency and flexibility are used in administering an army, but cannot be used in governing a state. When ignorant of command problems to share in the exercise of responsibilities, this engenders doubts in the minds of the officers. If one ignorant of military matters is sent to participate in the administration of the army, then in every movement there will be disagreement and mutual frustration, and the entire army will be hamstrung. That is why Pei Tu memorialized the throne to withdraw the army supervisor. Only then was he able to pacify Chao. In recent times, court officials have been used as supervisors of the army, and this is precisely what is wrong. If the army is confused and suspicious, neighboring rulers will cause trouble. This is what is meant by the saying, "A confused army leads to another's victory." The Grand Duke said, "One who is confused in purpose cannot respond to his enemy. The wrong person cannot be appointed to command." Lin, the Prime Minister of Chao, said, "Cao Cao is merely able to read his father's books, and is as yet ignorant of correlating changing circumstances. Now your Majesty, on account of his name, makes him the commander-in-chief. This is like gluing the pegs of a lute and then trying to tune it. Now there are 5 circumstances in which victory may be predicted. He who knows when he can fight and when he cannot will be victorious. He who understands how to use both large and small forces will be victorious. There are circumstances in war when many cannot attack few, and others when the weak can master the strong. One able to manipulate such circumstances will be victorious. He whose ranks are united in purpose will be victorious." Sorry, the right's cut off a little bit. The appropriate season is not as important as the advantages of the ground. These are not as important as the harmonious human relations. He who is prudent and lies in wait for an enemy who is not will be victorious. Create an invincible army and await the enemy's moment of vulnerability. A gentleman said, "To rely on rustics and not prepare is the greatest of crimes. To be prepared beforehand, before any contingency, is the greatest of virtues. He whose generals are able and not interfered with by the sovereign will be victorious." Therefore, Master Wang said, "To make appointments is the province of the sovereign, to decide on battles that of the general. A sovereign of high character and intelligence must be able to know the right man, should place the responsibility on him, and expect results. Now in war, there may be 100 changes in each step. When one sees he can, he advances. When he sees that things are difficult, he retires. To say that a general must await commands of the sovereign in such circumstances is like informing a superior you wish to put out a fire. Before the order to do so arrives, the ashes are cold, and it is said one must consult the army supervisor in these matters. This is as if in building a house beside the road one took advice from those who pass by. Of course, the work would never be completed. To put a rein on an able general while at the same time asking him to suppress a cunning enemy is like tying up the black hound of Han and then ordering him to catch elusive hares. What is the difference? It is in these 5 matters that the way to victory is known. Therefore I say, know the enemy and know yourself. In 100 battles you will never be in peril. When you are ignorant of the enemy, but know yourself, your chances of winning or losing are equal. If ignorant both of your enemy and of yourself, you are certain in every battle to be in peril. Such people are called mad bandits. What can they expect, if not defeat? End of chapter 3. Chapter 4. Dispositions. Sun Tzu said, "Anciently, the skillful warriors first made themselves invincible and awaited the enemy's moment of vulnerability. Invincibility depends on oneself, the enemy's vulnerability on him. It follows that those skilled in war can make themselves invincible, but cannot cause an enemy to be certainly vulnerable. That which depends on me, I can do. That which depends on the enemy cannot be certain. Therefore it is said that one may know how to win, but cannot necessarily do so. Invincibility lies in the defense, the possibility of victory in the attack. One defends when his strength is inadequate. He attacks when it is abundant. The experts in defense conceal themselves as under the ninefold earth. Those skilled in attack move as from above to ninefold heavens. Thus they are capable both of protecting themselves and of gaining a complete victory. Those expert at preparing defenses consider it fundamental to rely on the strength of such obstacles as mountains, rivers, and foothills. They make it impossible for the enemy to know where to attack. They secretly conceal themselves as under the nine-layered ground. Those expert in attack consider it fundamental to rely on the seasons and the advantages of the ground. They use inundations and fire according to the situation. They make it impossible for an enemy to know where to prepare. They release the attack like a lightning bolt from above the nine-layered heavens. To foresee a victory which the ordinary man can foresee is not the acme of skill. When Han Sen destroyed Chao State, he marched out of the well gorge before breakfast. He said, "We will destroy the Chao army and then meet for a meal." The generals were despondent and pretended to agree. Han Sen drew up his army with the river to its rear. The Chao troops climbed upon their breastworks, and, observing this, roared with laughter and taunted him. The general of Han does not know how to use troops. Han Sen then proceeded to defeat the Chao army, and after breakfasting beheaded Lord Ching An. This is an example of what the multitude does not comprehend. To triumph in battle and be universally acclaimed expert is not the acme of skill. For to lift an autumn down requires no great strength. To distinguish between the sun and moon is no test of vision. To hear the thunderclap is no indication of acute hearing. By autumn down, Sun Tzu means rabbit's down, which on the coming of autumn is extremely light. Anciently, those called skilled in war conquered an enemy easily conquered, and therefore the victories won by a master of war gain him neither reputation for wisdom nor merit for valor. A victory gained before the situation has crystallized is one of the common man does not comprehend. Thus, its author gains no reputation for sagacity. Before he has bloodied his blade, the enemy's state has already submitted. When you subdue your enemy without fighting, who will pronounce you valorous? For he wins his victories without erring. Without erring means that whatever he does ensures his victory. He conquers an enemy already defeated. In planning, never a useless move. In strategy, no step taken in vain. Therefore, the skillful commander takes up position in which he cannot be defeated, and misses no opportunity to master his enemy. Thus, a victorious army wins its victories before seeking battle. An enemy destined to defeat fights in the hope of winning. Duke Li Qing of Wei has said, "Now, the supreme requirements of generalship are a clear perception, the harmony of his host, a profound strategy coupled with far-reaching plans, an understanding of the seasons, and an ability to examine the human factors. For a general unable to estimate his capabilities or comprehend the arts of expediency and flexibility when faced with the opportunity to engage the enemy will advance in a stumbling and hesitant manner, looking anxiously first to his right and then to his left, and be unable to produce a plan. Credulous, he will place confidence in unreliable reports, believing at one moment this and at that and another that. As timorous as a fox in advancing or retiring, his groups will be scattered about. What is the difference between this and driving innocent people into boiling water or fire? Is this not exactly like driving cows and sheep to feed wolves or tigers? Those skilled in war cultivate the Tao and preserve the laws and are therefore able to formulate victorious policies. The Tao is the way of humanity and justice. Laws are regulations and institutions. Those who excel in war first cultivate their own humanity and justice and maintain their laws and institutions. By these means they make their governments invincible. Now the elements of the art of war are first, measurement of space; second, estimation of quantities; third, calculations; fourth, comparisons; and fifth, chances of victory. Measurement of space are derived from the ground. Quantities derive from measurement, figures from quantities, comparisons from figures, and victory from comparisons. Ground includes both distances and type of terrain. Measurement is calculation. Before the army is dispatched, calculations are made respecting the degree of difficulty of the enemy's land, the directness and deviousness of its roads, the number of his troops, the quantity of his war equipment, and the state of his morale. Calculations are made to see if the enemy can be attacked, and only after this is the population mobilized and troops raised. Thus, a victorious army as a hundredweight balanced against a grain, a defeated army as a grain balanced against a hundredweight. It is because of disposition that a victorious general is able to make his people fight with the effect of pent-up waters, which, suddenly released, plunge into a bottomless abyss. The nature of water is that it avoids heights and hastens to the lowlands. When a dam is broken, the water cascades with irresistible force. Now the shape of an army resembles water. Take advantage of the enemy's unpreparedness. Attack him when he does not expect it. Avoid his strength and strike his emptiness. And like water, none can oppose you. End of chapter 4. Chapter 5. Energy. Sun Tzu said, "Generally, management of many is the same as management of few. It is a matter of organization. To manage a host, one must first assign responsibilities to the generals and their assistants, and establish the strengths of ranks and files. 1 man is a single, 2 a pair, 3 a trio. A pair and a trio make 5, which is a squad. 2 squads make a section, 5 sections a platoon, 2 platoons a company, 2 companies a battalion, 2 battalions a regiment, 2 regiments a group, 2 groups a brigade, 2 brigades an army. Each is subordinate to the superior and controls the inferior. Each is properly trained. Thus one may manage a host of 1,000,000 men, just as he would a few. And to control many is the same as to control few. This is a matter of formations and signals. Now when masses of troops are employed, certainly they are widely separated, and ears are not able to hear acutely, nor eyes to see clearly. Therefore, officers and men are ordered to advance or retreat by observing the flags and banners, and to move or stop by signals of bells and drums. Thus the valiant shall not advance alone, nor shall the coward flee. That the army is certain to sustain the enemy's attack without suffering defeat is due to operations of the extraordinary and the normal forces. The force which confronts the enemy in the normal, that which goes to his flanks, the extraordinary. No commander of an army can wrest the advantage from the enemy without extraordinary forces. I make the enemy conceive my normal force to be the extraordinary and extraordinary, and to be the normal. Moreover, the normal may become the extraordinary, and vice versa. Troops thrown against the enemy as a grindstone against eggs is an example of a solid acting upon a void. Use the most solid to attack the most empty. Generally, in battle, use the nominal force to engage. Use the extraordinary to win. Now, the resources of those skilled in the use of extraordinary forces as infinite as the heavens and earth, as inexhaustible as the flow of the great rivers. For they end and recommence, cyclical as are the movements of the sun and moon. They die away and are reborn, recurrent as are the passing seasons. The musical notes are only 5 in number, but their melodies are so numerous that one cannot hear them all. The primary colors are only 5 in number, but their combinations are so infinite that one cannot visualize them all. The flavors are only 5 in number, but their blends are so various that one cannot taste them all. In battle, there are only the normal and extraordinary forces, but their combinations are limitless. None can comprehend them all. For these two forces are mutually reproductive, their interaction as endless as that of interlocked rings. Who can determine where one ends and the other begins? When torrential water tosses boulders, it is because of its momentum. When the strike of a hawk breaks the body of its prey, it is because of timing. Strike the enemy as swiftly as a falcon strikes its target. It surely breaks the back of its prey for the reason that it awaits the right moment to strike. Its movement is regulated. Thus the momentum of one skilled in war is overwhelming, and his attack precisely regulated. His potential is that of a fully drawn crossbow, his timing the release of the trigger. In the tumult and uproar the battle seems chaotic, but there is no disorder. The troops appear to be milling about in circles, but cannot be defeated. In battle all appears to be turmoil and confusion, but the flags and banners have prescribed arrangements, the sound of the cymbals fixed rules. Apparent confusion is a product of good order, apparent cowardice of courage, apparent weakness of strength. The verse means that if one wishes to feign disorder, to entice an enemy, he must himself be well disciplined. Only then can he feign confusion. One who wishes to simulate cowardice and lie in wait for his enemy must be courageous, for only then is he able to simulate fear. One who wishes to appear to be weak in order to make his enemy arrogant must be extremely strong. Only then can he feign weakness. Order or disorder depends on organization, courage or cowardice on circumstance, strength or weakness on dispositions. Now when troops gain a favorable situation, the coward is brave. If it be lost, the brave become cowards. In the art of war, there are no fixed rules. These can only be worked out according to circumstances. Thus, those skilled at making the enemy move do so by creating a situation to which he must conform. They entice him with something he is certain to take, and with lures of ostensible profit they await him in strength. Therefore, a skilled commander seeks victory from the situation, and does not demand it of his subordinates. Experts in war depend especially on opportunity and expediency. They do not place the burden of accomplishment on the men alone. He selects his men, and they exploit the situation. Now, the valiant can fight, the cautious defend, and the wise counsel. Thus there is none whose talent is wasted. Do not demand accomplishment of those who have no talent. When Cao Cao attacked Cheng Lu and Han Chung, he left generals Cheng Lai Lai Tin and Lo Chin in command of over 1,000 men to defend Ho Fei. Cao sent instructions to the army commissioner Tai and wrote on the edge of the envelope, "Open this only when the rebels arrive." Soon after, Sun of Wu with 100,000 men besieged Ho Fei. The generals opened the instructions and read, "If Sun Chi arrives, Generals Cheng and Li will go out to fight. General Lo will defend the city. The army commissioner shall not participate in the battle. All other generals should engage the enemy." Cheng Lao said, "Our lord is campaigning far away, and if we wait for the arrival of reinforcements, the rebels will certainly destroy us. Therefore the instructions say that before the enemy is assembled, we should immediately attack him in order to blunt his keen edge and to stabilize the morale of our own troops. Then we can defend the city. The opportunity for victory or defeat lies in this one action." Lai Tin and Cheng Lao went out to attack and actually defeated Sun, and the morale of the Wu army was rubbed out. They returned and put their defenses in order, and the troops felt secure. Sun Tzu assaulted the city for 10 days, but could not take it and withdrew. The historian Sun Xing, in discussing this, observed, "Now war is a matter of deception." As to the defense of Ho Fei, it was hanging in the air, weak and without reinforcements. If one trusts solely to brave generals who love fighting, this will cause trouble. If one relies solely on those who are cautious, their frightened hearts will find it difficult to control the situation. Now the method of employing men is to use the avaricious and the stupid, the wise and the brave, and to give responsibility to each in situations that suit him. Do not charge people to do what they cannot do. Select them and give them responsibilities commensurate with their abilities. He who relies on the situation uses his men in fighting as one rolls logs or stones. Now the nature of logs and stones is that on stable ground they are static. On unstable ground they move. If square, they stop. If round, they roll. Thus, the potential of troops skillfully commanded in battle may be compared to that of round boulders which roll down from mountain heights. Thus one need use but little strength to achieve much. Li Qing said, "In war, there are 3 kinds of situation. When the general is contemptuous of his army and his officers love to fight, their ambitions soaring as high as the azure clouds and their spirits as fierce as hurricanes. This is situation in respect to morale. When one man defends a narrow mountain defile, which is like sheep's intestines, or the door of a doghouse, he can withstand 1,000. This is situation in respect to terrain. When one takes advantage of the enemy's laxity, his wariness, his hunger and thirst, or strikes when his advanced camps are not settled, or his army is only halfway across a river, this is situation in respect to the enemy. Therefore, when using troops, one must take advantage of the situation, exactly as if we're setting a ball in motion on a steep slope. The force applied is minute, but the results are enormous." End of chapter 5. Chapter 6. Weaknesses and Strengths. Sun Tzu said, "Generally, he who occupies the field of battle first and awaits his enemy is at ease. He who comes later to the scene and rushes into the fight is wary. And therefore those skilled in war bring the enemy to the field of battle and are not brought there by him. One able to make the enemy come of his own accord does so by offering him some advantage, and one able to prevent him from coming does so by hurting him. If you are able to hold critical points on his strategic roads, the enemy cannot come. Therefore, Master Wang said, when a cat is at the rat hole, 10,000 rats dare not come out. When a tiger guards the ford, 10,000 deer cannot cross. When the enemy is at ease, be able to weary him. When well fed, to starve him. When at rest, to make him move. Appear at places to which he must hasten. Move swiftly where he does not expect you. That you may march 1,000 li without wearying yourself is because you travel where there is no enemy. Go into emptiness. Strike voids. Bypass what he defends. Hit him where he does not expect you. To be certain to take what you attack is to attack a place the enemy does not protect. To be certain to hold what you defend is to defend a place the enemy does not attack. Therefore, against those skilled in attack, an enemy does not know where to defend. Against the experts in defense, the enemy does not know where to attack. Subtle is insubstantial. The expert leaves no trace. Divinely mysterious, he is inaudible. Thus, he is master of his enemy's fate. I make the enemy see my strengths as weaknesses, and my weaknesses as strengths, while I cause his strengths to become weaknesses, and discover where he is not strong. I conceal my tracks so that none can discern them. I keep silence so that none can hear me. He whose advance is irresistible plunges into his enemy's weak positions. He who in withdraw cannot be pursued moves so swiftly that he cannot be overtaken. Come like the wind, go like the lightning. When I wish to give battle, my enemy, even though protected by high walls and deep moats, cannot help but engage me, for I attack a position he must succour. When I wish to avoid battle, I may defend myself simply by drawing a line on the ground. The enemy will be unable to attack me because I divert him from going where he wishes. Chu Ko Leng camped at Yangping and ordered Wei Yin and various generals to combine forces and go down to the east. Chu Ko Leng left only 10,000 men to defend the city while he awaited reports. He said, Chu Ko Leng is in the city. His troops are few. He is not strong. His generals and officers have lost their heart. At this time, Chu Ko Leng's spirit were high as usual. He ordered his troops to lay down their banners and silence their drums, and did not allow his men to go out. He opened the 4 gates and swept and sprinkled the streets. He suspected an ambush, and led his army in haste to the northern mountains. Chu Ko Leng remarked to his chief of staff, Su Ma I thought I had prepared an ambush and fled along the mountain ranges. Su Ma I later learned of this and was overcome with regrets. If I am able to determine the enemy's dispositions, while at the same time I conceal my own, then I can concentrate, and he must divide. And if I concentrate while he divides, I can use my entire strength to attack a fraction of his. There, I will be numerically superior. Then, if I am able to use many to strike few at the selected point, those I deal with will be in dire straits. Sometimes I use light troops and vigorous horsemen to attack where he is unprepared. Sometimes strong crossbowmen and bow-stretching archers to snatch key positions, to stir up his left, overrun his right, alarm him to the front, and strike suddenly into his rear. In broad daylight I deceive him by the use of flags and banners, and at night confuse him by beating drums. Then, in fear and trembling, he will divide his forces to take precautionary measures. The enemy must know where I intend to give battle, for if he does not know where I intend to give battle, he must prepare in a great many places. And when he prepares in a great many places, those I have to fight in any one place will be few. For if he prepares to the front, his rear will be weak, and if to the rear, his front will be fragile. If he repairs to the left, his right will be vulnerable, and if to the right, there will be few on his left. And when he prepares everywhere, he will be weak everywhere. He will be unable to fathom where my chariots will actually go out, or where my cavalry will actually come from, or where my infantry will actually follow up. And there he will disperse and divide, and will have to guard against me everywhere. Consequently, his force will be scattered and weakened, and his strength divided and dissipated. And, at the place I engage him, I can use a large host against his isolated units. One who has few must prepare against the enemy. One who has many makes the enemy prepare against him. If one knows where and when a battle will be fought, his troops can march 1,000 li and meet on the field. But if one knows neither the battleground nor the day of battle, the left will be unable to aid the right, or the right the left, the van to support the rear, or the rear the van. How much more is this so when separated by several tens of li, or indeed even by a few? Now those skilled in war must know where and when a battle will be fought. They measure the roads and fix the date. They divide the army and march in separate columns. Those who are distant start first, those who are nearby later. Thus the meeting of troops from distances of 1,000 li takes place at the same time. It is like people coming to a city market. Although I estimate the troops of you as many, of what benefit is this superiority in respect to the outcome? Thus I say that victory can be created, for even if the enemy is numerous, I can prevent him from engaging. Although the enemy be numerous, if he does not know my military situation, I can always make him urgently attend to his own preparations, so that he has no leisure to plan to fight me. Therefore, determine the enemy's plans, and you will know which strategy will be successful and which will not. Agitate and ascertain the pattern of his movement. Determine his dispositions, and so ascertain to field the battle. Probe him and learn where his strength is abundant and where deficient. The ultimate in disposing one's troops is to be without discernible shape. Then the most penetrating spies cannot pry in, nor can the wise lay plans against you. It is according to the shapes that I lay the plans for victory. But the multitude does not comprehend this. Although every one can see the outward aspects, no one understands the way in which I have created victory. Therefore, when I have won a victory, I do not repeat my tactics, but respond to circumstances in an infinite variety of ways. Now an army may be likened to water, for just as flowing water avoids the heights and hastens to the lowlands, so an army avoids strength and strikes weakness. And as water shapes its flow in accordance with the ground, so an army manages its victory in accordance with the situation of the enemy. And as water has no constant form, there are in war no constant conditions. Thus, one able to gain the victory by modifying his tactics in accordance with the enemy's situation may be said to be divine. Of the 5 elements, none is always predominant. Of the 4 seasons, none lasts forever. Of the days, some are long and some are short, and the moon waxes and wanes. End of chapter 6. Chapter 7. Maneuver. Sun Tzu said, "Normally when the army is employed, the general first receives his comrades from the sovereign. He assembles the troops and mobilizes the people. He blends the army into a harmonious entity and encamps it. He receives the sovereign's mandate, and in compliance with the victorious deliberations of the temple councils, reverently executes the punishments ordained by heaven. Nothing is more difficult than the art of maneuver. What is difficult about maneuver is to make the devious route the most direct and to turn misfortune to advantage. Thus, march by an indirect route and divert the enemy by enticing him with the bait. So doing, you may set out after he does, and arrive before him. No one able to do this understands the strategy of the direct and the indirect. Make it appear that you are far off. You may start after the enemy and arrive before him because you know how to estimate and calculate distances. He who wishes to snatch an advantage takes a devious and distant route and makes of it the short way. He turns misfortune to his advantage. He deceives and fools the enemy to make him dilatory and lax, and then marches on speedily. Now both advantage and danger are inherent in maneuver. One skilled will profit by it. If he is not, it is dangerous. One who sets the entire army in motion to chase an advantage will not attain it. If he abandons the camp to contend for advantage, the stores will be lost. If one moves with everything, the stores will travel slowly, and he will not gain the advantage. If he leaves the heavy baggage behind and presses on with the light troops, it is to be feared, and the baggage would be lost. It follows that when one rolls up the armor and sets out speedily, stopping neither day nor night and marching at double time for 100 li, the three commanders will be captured, for the vigorous troops will arrive first, and the feeble straggle along behind, so that if this method is used, only 1/10 of the army will arrive. Normally, an army marches 30 li a day, which is one stage. In a forced march of double distance, it covers 2 stages. You can cover 100 li only if you rest neither day nor night. If the march is conducted in this manner, the troops will be taken prisoner. When Sun Tzu says that if this method is used, only 1 out of 10 will arrive, he means that when there is no alternative and you must contend for an advantageous position, you select the most robust man of 10 to go first while you order the remainder to follow in the rear. So, of 10,000 men, you select 1,000 who will arrive at dawn. The remainder will arrive continuously, some in the late morning and some in mid-afternoon, so that none is exhausted, and all arrive in succession to join those who preceded them. The sound of their marching is uninterrupted. In contending for advantage, it must be for a strategically critical point. Then 1,000 will be sufficient to defend it until those who follow arrive. In a forced march of 50 li, the commander of the van will fall, and using this method but half the army will arrive. In a forced march of 30 li, but 2/3 will arrive. It follows that an army which lacks heavy equipment fodder, food, and stores will be lost. The protection of metal walls is not important as grain and food. Those who do not know the conditions of mountains and forests, hazardous defiles, marshes, and swamps, cannot conduct the march of an army. Those who do not use local guides are unable to obtain the advantages on the ground. Generally, the commander must thoroughly acquaint himself beforehand with the maps so that he knows dangerous places for chariots and carts, where the water is too deep for wagons, passes in famous mountains, the principal rivers, the locations of highlands and hills, where rushes, forests, and reeds are luxuriant, the road distances, the size of cities and towns, well-known cities and abandoned ones, and where there are flourishing orchards. All this must be known, as well as the way boundaries run in and out. All these facts the general must store in his mind. Only then will he not lose the advantage of the ground. We should select the bravest officers and those who are most intelligent and keen, and using local guides, secretly traverse mountain and forest noiselessly and concealing our traces. Sometimes we make artificial animals, feet to put on our feet. At others we put artificial birds on our hats and quietly conceal ourselves in luxuriant undergrowth. After this, we listen carefully for distant sounds and screw up our eyes to see clearly. We concentrate our wits so that we may snatch an opportunity. We observe the indications of the atmosphere, look for traces in the water to know if the enemy has waded a stream, and watch for movement of the trees which indicates his approach. Now, if having received instructions to launch a campaign, we hasten to unfamiliar land where cultural influence has not penetrated and communications are cut, and rush into its defiles, is it not difficult? If I go with the solitary army, the enemy awaits me vigilantly, for the situations of an attacker and a defender are vastly different. How much more so when the enemy concentrates on deception and uses many misleading devices. If we have made no plans, we plunge in headlong. By braving the dangers and entering perilous places, we face the calamity of being trapped or inundated. Marching as if drunk, we may run into an unexpected fight. When we stop at night, we are worried by false alarms. If we hasten along unprepared, we fall into ambushes. This is to plunge an army of bears and tigers into the land of death. How can we cope with the rebel's fortifications, or sweep him out of deceptive dens? Therefore, in the enemy's country, the mountains, rivers, highlands, lowlands, and hills which he can defend as strategic points, the forests, reeds, rushes, and luxuriant grasses in which he can conceal himself, the distances over the roads and paths, the size of cities and towns, the extent of the villages, the fertility of barrenness of the fields, the depth of irrigation works, the amounts of stores, the size of the opposing army, the keenness of weapons, all must be fully known. Then we have the enemy in our sights, and he can be easily taken. Move when it is advantageous and create changes in the situation by dispersal and concentration of forces. When campaigning, be swift as the wind. In leisurely march, majestic as the forest. In raiding and plundering, like fire. In standing, firm as the mountains. As unfathomable as the clouds, move like a thunderbolt. When you plunder the countryside, divide your forces. When you conquer territory, divide the profits. Weigh the situation, then move. He who knows the art of the direct and the indirect approach will be victorious. Such is the art of maneuvering. The Book of Military Administration says, "As the voice cannot be heard in battle, drums and bells are used. As troops cannot see each other clearly in battle, flags and banners are used. Now gongs and drums, banners and flags are used to focus the attention of the troops. When the troops can be thus united, the brave cannot advance alone, nor can the cowardly withdraw. This is the art of employing a host." The military law states, "Those who, when they should advance, do not do so, and those who, when they should retire, do not do so, are beheaded." When Wu Qi fought against Qin, there was no officer who before battle was joined was unable to control his ardor. He advanced and took a pair of heads and returned. Wu Qi ordered him beheaded. The army commissioner admonished him, saying, "This is a talented officer. You should not behead him." Wu Qi replied, "I am confident he is an officer of talent, but he is disobedient." Thereupon he beheaded him. In night fighting, use many torches and drums. In day fighting, many banners and flags, in order to influence the sight and hearing of our troops. Just as large formations include smaller ones, so large camps include smaller ones. The army of the van, rear, right, and left, has each its own camp. These form a circle around the headquarters of the commander-in-chief in the center. All the camps encompass the headquarters. The several corners are hooked together, so that the camp appears like P'Li, constellation. The distance between camps is not greater than 100 paces or less than 50. The roads and paths join to enable troops to parade. The fortifications face each other so that they each can assist the others with bows and crossbows. At every crossroad, a small fort is built. On top, firewood is piled. Inside there are concealed tunnels. One climbs up to these by ladders. Sentries are stationed there. After darkness, if a sentry hears drum beats on the four sides of the camp, he sets off the beacon of fire. Therefore, if the enemy attacks at night, he may get in at the gates, but everywhere there are small camps, each firmly defended, and to the east, west, north, or south, he does not know which to attack. In the camp of the commander-in-chief, or in the smaller camps, those who first know the enemy has come to allow them all to enter. They then beat the drums, and all the camps respond. At all the small forts, beacon fires are lit, making it as light as day. Whereupon the officers and troops close the gates of the camps and man the fortifications and look down upon the enemy. Strong crossbows and powerful bows shoot in all directions. Our only worry is that the enemy will not attack at night, for if he does, he is certain to be defeated. Now an enemy may be robbed of its spirit and its commander deprived of his courage. Wu Qi said, "The responsibility for a martial host of 1,000,000 lies in one man. He is the trigger of its spirit. If an enemy has been deprived of its morale, its general will also lose his heart. Heart is that by which the general masters. Now order and confusion, bravery and cowardice are qualities dominated by the heart. Therefore, the expert at controlling his enemy frustrates him and then moves against him. He aggravates him to confuse him and harasses him to make him fearful. Thus he robs his enemy of his heart and of his ability to plan. During the early morning spirits are keen, during the day they flag, and in the evening thoughts turn toward home. And therefore those skilled in war avoid the enemy when his spirit is keen, and attack him when it is sluggish and his soldiers homesick. This is control of the moral factor. In good order they await a disorderly enemy, in serenity a clamorous one. This is control of the mental factor. In serenity and firmness they are not destroyed by events, for the lone general who with subtlety. For the lone general who with subtlety must control a host of 1,000,000 against an enemy as fierce as tigers. Advantages and disadvantages are intermixed. In the face of countless changes he must be wise and flexible. He must bear in mind all possibilities. Unless he is stout of heart and his judgment not confused, how would he be able to respond to circumstances without coming to his wit's end? And how settle affairs without being bewildered? When unexpectedly confronted with grave difficulties, how could he not be alarmed? How could he control the myriad matters without being confused? Close to the field of battle, they await an enemy coming from afar. At rest, an exhausted enemy with well-fed troops, hungry ones. This is control of the physical factor. They do not engage an enemy advancing with well-ordered banners, nor one whose formations are impressive array. This is control of the factor of changing circumstances. Therefore, the art of employing troops is that when the enemy occupies high ground, do not confront him. With his back resting on hills, do not oppose him. When he pretends to flee, do not pursue. Do not attack his elite troops. Do not gobble preferred baits. The fish which covets bait is caught. Troops who covet bait are defeated. The three strategies says, under fragrant bait there is certain to be a hooked fish. Do not thwart an enemy returning homewards. To a surrounded enemy you must leave a way of escape. Show him there is a road to safety, and so create it in his mind that the idea that there is an alternative to death. Then strike. When Cao surrounded Hukan, he issued an order. When the city is taken, the defenders will be buried. For month after month it did not fall. Cao Zhen said, "When a city is surrounded, it is essential to show the besieged that there is a way to survival. Now, sir, as you have told them they must fight to the death, everyone will fight to save his own skin. The city is strong and has plentiful supply of food. If we attack them, many officers and men will be wounded. If we preserve in this, it will take many days. To encamp under the walls of a strong city and attack rebels determined to fight to the death is not a good plan." Cao followed this advice, and the city submitted. Do not press an enemy at bay. Wild beasts, when at bay, fight desperately. How much more is this true of men? If they know there is no alternative, they will fight to the death. During the reign of Emperor of the Han, Chao Chung was suppressing a revolt of Chiang's tribe. The Chiang tribesmen saw his large army, discarded their heavy baggage, and set out to ford the Yellow River. The road was through narrow defiles, and Chung Ku drove them along in a leisurely manner. "We are in pursuit of a great advantage, but proceed slowly. They are desperate. I cannot press them. If I do this easily, they will go without even looking around. If I press them, they will turn on us and fight to the death." All the generals said, "Wonderful. This is the method of employing troops." End of chapter 8. End of chapter 7. Chapter 8. The 9 Variables. Sun Tzu said, "In general, the system of employing troops is that the commander receives his mandate from the sovereign to mobilize the people and assemble the army. You should not encamp in low-lying ground. In communicating ground, unite with your allies. You should not linger to desolate ground. In enclosed ground, resourcefulness is required. In death ground, fight. There are some roads not to follow, some troops not to strike, some cities not to assault, and some ground which should not be contested. In my opinion, troops put out as bait, elite troops, and an enemy in well-regulated and imposing formation should not be attacked. Probably this refers to an enemy in strategic position behind lofty walls and deep moats, with a plentiful store of grain and food, whose purpose is to detain my army. Should I attack the city and take it, there would be no advantage worth mentioning. If I do not take it, the assault will certainly grind down the power of my army. Therefore, I should not attack it." There are occasions when the commands of the sovereign need not be obeyed. When it is expedient in operations, the general need not be restricted by the commands of the sovereign. Weapons are inauspicious instruments, strife contrary to virtue, the general to minister of death, who is not responsible to the heavens above, to the earth beneath, to the enemy in his front, or to the sovereign in his rear. Now King Fu Chai said, "When you see the correct course, act. Do not wait for orders." A general thoroughly versed in the advantages of the 9 variable factors knows how to employ troops. The general must rely on his ability to control the situation to his advantage as opportunity dictates. He is not bound by established procedures. The general who does not understand the advantages of the 9 variable factors will not be able to use the ground to his advantage, even though familiar with it. A general prizes opportune changes in circumstances. In the direction of military operations, one who does not understand the tactics suitable to the 9 variables situations will be unable to use his troops effectively, even if he understands the 5 advantages. The 5 variations are the following. A road, although may be the shortest, it is not to be followed if one knows its dangers It is dangerous, and there is the contingency of ambush. An army, although it may be attacked, is not to be attacked if it is in desperate circumstances, and there is the possibility that the enemy will fight to the death. A city, although isolated and susceptible to attack, is not to be attacked if there is the probability that it is well stocked with provisions, defended by crack troops under command of a wise general, that its ministers are loyal and their plans unfathomable. Ground, although it may be contested, is not to be fought for if one knows that after getting it, it will be difficult to defend, or that he gains no advantage by obtaining it, but will probably be counterattacked and suffer casualties. The orders of a sovereign, although they should be followed, are not to be followed if the general knows they contain the danger of harmful superintendence of affairs from the capital. These 5 contingencies must be managed as they arise, as the circumstances dictate at the time, for they cannot be settled beforehand. And for this reason, the wise general in his deliberations must consider both favorable and unfavorable factors. He ponders the dangers inherent in the advantages, and the advantages inherent in the dangers. By taking into account the favorable factors, he makes his plan feasible. By taking into account the unfavorable, he may resolve the difficulties. If I wish to take advantage of the enemy, I must perceive not just the advantage in doing so, but must first consider the ways he can harm me if I do. Advantage and disadvantage are mutually reproductive, the enlightened deliberate. He who intimidates his neighbors does so by inflicting injury upon them. Plans and projects for harming the enemy are not confined to any one method. Sometimes entices wise and virtuous men away so that he has no counselors, or send treacherous people to his country to wreck his administration. Sometimes use cunning deceptions to alienate his ministers from the sovereign, or send skilled craftsmen to encourage his people to exhaust their wealth, or present him with licentious musicians and dancers to change his customs, or give him beautiful women to bewilder him. He wearies them by keeping them constantly occupied, and he makes them rush about by offering them ostensible advantages. It is a doctrine of war not to assume the enemy will not come, but rather to rely on one's readiness to meet him. Not to presume that he will not attack, but rather to make one's self invincible. The Strategies of Wu says, "When the world is at peace, a gentleman keeps his sword by his side." There are 5 qualities which are dangerous in the character of a general. If reckless, he can be killed. A general who is stupid and courageous is a calamity. Wu Chi said, "When people discuss a general, they always pay attention to his courage. As far as a general is concerned, courage is but one quality. Now, a valiant general will be certain to enter an engagement recklessly, and if he does so, he will not appreciate what is advantageous. If cowardly, captured." The Fa says, "One who esteems life above all will become overcome with hesitancy. Hesitancy in a general is a great calamity. If quick-tempered, you can make a fool of him. An impulsive man can be provoked to rage and brought to his death. One easily angered is irascible, obstinate, and hasty. He does not consider difficulties. What is essential is the temperament of a general is steadiness. If he has too delicate a sense of honor, you can calumniate him. One anxious to defend his reputation pays no regard to anything else. If he is of a compassionate nature, you can harass him. He who is humanitarian and compassionate and fears only casualties cannot give up temporary advantage for a long-term gain and is unable to let go this in order to seize that. Now, these 5 traits of character are serious faults in a general, and in military operations are calamitous. The ruin of the army and the death of the general are inevitable results of these shortcomings. They must be deeply pondered. End of chapter 8. Chapter 9. Marches. Sun Tzu said, "Generally, when taking up a position and confronting the enemy, having crossed the mountains, stay close to valleys. Encamp on high ground facing the sunny side. Fight downhill, do not ascend to attack. So much for taking position in mountains. After crossing a river, you must move some distance away from it. When an advancing enemy crosses water, do not meet him at the water's edge. It is advantageous to allow half his force to cross and then strike." During the spring and autumn period, the Duke of Sung came to Hung and engage the Chu army. The Sung army had deployed before the Chu troops had completed crossing the river. The Minister of War said, "The enemy is many, we are but few. I request permission to attack before he has completed his crossing." The Duke of Sung replied, "You cannot." When the Chu army had completed the river crossing, but had not yet drawn up its formations, the minister again asked permission to attack, and the Duke replied, "Not yet. When they have drawn up their army, we will attack." The Sung army was defeated, the Duke wounded in the thigh, and the officers of the van annihilated. If you wish to give battle, do not confront your enemy close to the water. Take position on high ground, facing the sunlight. Do not take position downstream. This relates to taking up positions near a river. Cross salt marshes speedily. Do not linger in them. If you encounter the enemy in the middle of a salt marsh, you must take position close to grass and water with trees to your rear. This has to do with taking up position in salt marshes. In level ground, occupy a position which facilitates your action. With heights to your rear and right, the field of battle is to the front and the rear is safe. This is how to take up positions in level ground. Generally, these are advantageous for encamping in the 4 situations named. By using them, the Yellow Emperor conquered 4 sovereigns. An army prefers high ground to low, esteems sunlight and dislikes shade. Thus, while nourishing its health, the army occupies a firm position. An army that does not suffer from countless diseases is said to be certain of victory. When near mounds, foothills, dikes, or embankments, you must take position on the sunny side and rest your right and rear on them. These methods are all advantageous for the army, and gain the help the ground affords. Where there are precipitous torrents, heavenly wells, heavenly prisons, heavenly nets, heavenly traps, and heavenly cracks, you must march speedily away from them. Do not approach them. Raging waters and deep mountains are precipitous torrents. A place surrounded by heights with low-lying ground in the center is called a heavenly well. When you pass through mountains and the terrain resembles a covered cage, it is a heavenly prison. Places where troops can be entrapped and cut off are called heavenly nets. Where the land is sunken, it is a heavenly trap. Where mountain gorges are narrow and where the road is sunken for several tens of feet, this is a heavenly crack. I keep a distance from these and draw the enemy toward them. I face them and cause him to put his back to them. When on the flanks of the army there are dangerous defiles or ponds covered with aquatic grasses where reeds and rushes grow, or forested mountains with dense tangled undergrowth, you must carefully search them out. For these are places where ambushes are laid and spies are hidden. When the enemy is near by but lying low, he is depending on a favorable position. When he challenges to battle from afar, he wishes to lure you to advance. For when he is in easy ground, he is in an advantageous position. When the trees are seen to move, the enemy is advancing. When many obstacles have been placed in the undergrowth, it is for the purpose of deception. Birds rising in flight is a sign that the enemy is lying in ambush. When the wild animals are startled and flee, he is trying to take you unaware. Dust spurting upward in high straight columns indicates the approach of chariots. When it hangs low and it is widespread, infantry is approaching. When chariots and cavalry travel rapidly, they come one after the other like fish on a string, and therefore the dust rises high in slender columns. Now when the army marches, there should be patrols out to the front to observe. If they see dust raised by the enemy, they must speedily report this to the commanding general. When dust rises in scattered areas, the enemy is bringing in firewood. When there are numerous small patches which seem to come and go, he is encamping the army. When the enemy's envoys speak in humble terms, but he continues his preparations, he will advance. When Tin Tan was defending Chai Mo, the Yin general Chai Chi surrounded it. Tin Tan personally handled the spade and shared in the labor of the troops. He sent his wives and concubines to enroll in the ranks, and divided his own food to entertain his officers. He also sent women to the city walls to ask for terms of surrender. The Yin general was very pleased. Tian Tan also collected 24,000 ounces of gold, and made the rich citizens send a letter to the Yin general, which said, "The city is to be surrendered immediately. Our only wish is that you will not make our wives and concubines prisoners." The Yin army became increasingly relaxed and negligent, and Tian Tan sallied out of the city and inflicted a crushing defeat on them. When their language is deceptive, but the enemy pretentiously advances, he will retreat. When the envoys speak in apologetic terms, he wishes a respite. When without a previous understanding the enemy asks for a truce, he is plotting. If without reason one begs for a truce, it is assuredly because affairs in his country are in dangerous state, and he is worried, and wishes to make a plan to gain a respite. Or otherwise he knows that our situation is susceptible to his plots, and he wants to forestall our suspicions by asking for a truce. Then he will take advantage of our unpreparedness. When light chariots first go out and take position on the flanks, the enemy is forming for battle. In the fish scale formation, chariots are in front, infantry behind them. When his troops march speedily and he parades his battle chariots, he is expecting to rendezvous with reinforcements. When half his force advances and half withdraws, he is attempting to decoy you. When his troops lean on their weapons, they are famished. When drawers of water drink before carrying it to camp, his troops are suffering from thirst. When the enemy sees an advantage, but does not advance to seize it, he is fatigued. When birds gather above his campsites, they are empty. Sun Tzu is describing how to distinguish between the true and the false in the enemy's aspect. When at night the enemy's camp is clamorous, he is fearful. His troops are terrified and insecure. They are boisterous to reassure themselves. When his troops are disorderly, the general has no prestige. When the general's orders are not strict and his deportment undignified, the officers will be disorderly. When his flags and banners move about constantly, he is in disarray. Duke Chuang of Lu defeated Qi at Changshao. He requested permission to pursue. The Duke asked him why. He replied, "I see that the ruts of their chariots are confused and their flags and banners drooping. Therefore, I wish to pursue them." If the officers are short-tempered, they are exhausted. When the general lays on unnecessary projects, everyone is fatigued. When administration and orders are inconsistent, the men's spirits are low, and the officers exceedingly angry. When the enemy feeds grain to the horses and his men meat, and when his troops neither hang up their cooking pots nor return to their shelters, the enemy is desperate. The enemy feeds grain to the horses, and the men eat meat in order to increase their strength and powers of endurance. If the enemy has no cooking pots, it will not again eat. If the troops do not go back to their shelters, they have no thoughts of home, and intend to engage in decisive battle. When troops continually gather in small groups and whisper together, the general has lost the confidence of the army. Too frequent rewards indicate that the general is at the end of his resources. Too frequent punishments that he is in acute distress. If the officers at first treat the men violently, and later are fearful of them, the limit of indiscipline has been reached. When the enemy troops are in high spirits, and although facing you, do not join battle for a long time, nor leave, you must thoroughly investigate the situation. In war, numbers alone confer no advantage. Do not advance relying on sheer military power. It is sufficient to estimate the enemy's situation correctly and to concentrate your strength to capture him. There is no more to it than this. He who lacks foresight and underestimates his enemy will surely be captured by him. If troops are punished before their loyalty is secured, they will be disobedient. If not obedient, it is difficult to employ them. If troops are loyal, but punishments are not enforced, you cannot employ them. Thus, command them with civility, and imbue them uniformly with martial ardor, and it may be said that victory is certain. If orders which are consistently effective are used in instructing the troops, they will be obedient. If orders which are not consistently effective are used in instructing them, they will be disobedient. When orders are consistently trustworthy and observed, the relationship of a commander with his troops is satisfactory. End of chapter 9. Chapter 10. Terrain. Sun Tzu said, "Ground may be classified according to its nature as accessible, entrapping, indecisive, constricted, precipitous, and distant. Ground which both we and the enemy can traverse with equal ease is called accessible. In such ground, he who first takes high sunny positions convenient to his supply routes can fight advantageously. Ground easy to get out of but difficult to return to is entrapping. The nature of this ground is such that if the enemy is unprepared and you sally out, you may defeat him. If the enemy is prepared and you go out and engage, but do not win, it is difficult to return. This is unprofitable. Ground equally disadvantageous for both the enemy and ourselves to enter is indecisive. The nature of this ground is such that although the enemy holds out a bait, I do not go forth, but entice him by marching off. When I have drawn out half his force, I can strike him advantageously." Li Qing's Art of War says, "In ground which offers no advantage to either side, we shall lure the enemy by feigned departure, wait until half his force has come out, and make an intercepting attack. If I first occupy constricted ground, I must block the passes and await the enemy. If the enemy first occupies such ground and blocks the defiles, I should not follow him. If he does not block them completely, I may do so. In precipitous ground, I must take position on the sunny heights and await the enemy. If he first occupies such ground, I lure him by marching off. I do not follow him. If one should be the first to occupy a position in level ground, how much more does this apply to difficult and dangerous places? How can such terrain be given to the enemy? When at a distance from an enemy of equal strength, it is difficult to provoke battle and unprofitable to engage him in his chosen position. These are the principles relating to 6 different types of ground. It is the highest responsibility of the general to inquire into them with the utmost care. Now, the nature of the ground is the fundamental factor in aiding the army to set up its victory. Now, when the troops flee, are insubordinate, distressed, collapse, in disorder, or are routed, it is the fault of the general. None of these disasters can be attributed to natural causes. Other conditions being equal, if a force attacks 10 times its size, the result is flight. When one is to be used to attack 10, we should first compare the wisdom and the strategy of the opposing generals, the bravery and cowardice of the troops, the question of whether, of the advantages offered by the ground, whether the troops are well fed or hungry, weary or rested. When troops are strong and officers weak, the army is insubordinate. The verse is speaking of troops and non-commissioned officers who are unruly and overbearing, and generals and commanders who are timid and weak. In the present dynasty, at the beginning of Qing's reign period, Tian Pu was ordered to take command in Wei for the purpose of attacking Wang Ting Chao's. Pu had grown up in Wei, and the people there held him in contempt, and several tens of thousands of men all rode donkeys about the camp. Pu was unable to restrain them. He remained in his position for several months, and when he wished to give battle, the officers and troops dispersed and scattered in all directions. Pu cut his own throat. When the officers are valiant and the troops ineffective, the army is in distress. When senior officers are angry and insubordinate, and on encountering the enemy rush into battle with no understanding of the feasibility of engaging and without awaiting orders from the commander, the army is in a state of collapse. Senior officers mean subordinate generals. If, in a rage, they attack the enemy without measuring the strength of both sides, then the army is assuredly in a state of collapse. When the general is morally weak and his discipline not strict, when his instructions and guidance are not enlightened, when there are no consistent rules to guide the officers and men, when the formations are slovenly, the army is in disorder. Chaos, self-induced. When a commander unable to estimate his enemy uses a small force to engage a large one, or weak troops to strike the strong, or when he fails to select chic troops for the van, the result is rout. Under these conditions he commands certain to flee troops. In the Han, the gallants from 3 Rivers were sword friends of unusual talent. In Wu, the shock troops were called dissolvers of difficulty. In Qi, fate deciders. In Tang, leapers of agitators. These were various names applied to shock troops. Nothing is more important in the tactics of winning battles than to employ them. Generally, when all the troops are encamped together, the general selects from every camp its high-spirited and valiant officers who are distinguished by agility and strength, and whose martial accomplishments are above the ordinary. These are grouped to form a special corps of 10 men, but one is selected of 10,000, 1,000. Cheng Yu. Generally, in battle, it is essential to use the elite troops as the vanguard sharp point. First, because this strengthens our own determination. Second, because they blunt the enemy's edge. When any of these 6 conditions prevails, the army is on the road to defeat. It is the highest responsibility of the general that he examine them carefully. Confirmation of the ground is of the greatest assistance in battle. Therefore, to estimate the enemy's situation and to calculate distances and the degree of difficulty of the terrain so as to control victory are virtues of the superior general. He who fights with full knowledge of these factors is certain to win. He who does not will surely be defeated. If the situation is one of victory but the sovereign has issued orders not to engage, the general may decide to fight. If the situation is such that he cannot win, but the sovereign has issued orders to engage, he need not do so. And therefore, the general, who in advancing does not seek personal fame, and in withdrawing is not concerned with avoiding punishment, but whose only purpose is to protect the people and promote the best interests of his sovereign, is the precious jewel of the state. Such a general has no personal interest. Few such are to be had. Because such a general regards his men as infants, they will march with him into the deepest valleys. He treats them as his own beloved sons, and they will die with him. If he cherishes his men in this way, he will gain their utmost strength. Thus, the Viscount of Chu needed but to speak a word, and the soldiers felt as if clad in warm silken garments. During the warring states, when Wu Qi was a general, he took the same food and wore the same clothes as the lowliest of his troops. On his bed there was no mat. On the march he did not mount his horse. He himself carried his reserve rations. He shared exhaustion and bitter toil with his troops. Therefore, the military code says, the general must be the first in the toils and fatigues of the army. In the heat of the summer he does not spread his parasol, nor in the cold of winter don thick clothing. In dangerous places he must dismount and walk. He waits until the army's wells have been dug, and only then drinks, until the army's food is cooked before he eats, until the army's fortifications have been completed to shelter himself. If a general indulges his troops but is unable to employ them, he loves them but cannot enforce his commands. If the troops are disorderly and he is unable to control them, they may be compared to spoiled children, and are useless. If one uses kindness exclusively, the troops become like arrogant children and cannot be employed. This is the reason Cao Cao's cut off his own hair, so punished himself. Good commanders are both loved and feared. That is all there is to it. If I know that my troops are capable of striking the enemy, but do not know that he is invulnerable to attack, my chance of victory is but half. If I know that the enemy is vulnerable to attack, but do not know my troops are incapable of striking him, my chance of victory is but half. If I know that the enemy can be attacked, and that my troops are capable of attacking him, but do not realize that, because of the conformation of the ground, I should not attack, my chance of victory is but half. Therefore, when those experienced in war move, they make no mistakes. When they act, their resources are limitless. And therefore I say, know the enemy, know yourself. Your victory will never be endangered. Know the ground, know the weather. Your victory will then be total. End of chapter 10. Chapter 11. The 9 Varieties of Ground. Sun Tzu said, in respect to the employment of troops, ground may be classified as dispersive, frontier, key, communicating, focal, serious, difficult, encircled, and death. When a feudal lord fights in his own territory, he is in dispersive ground. Here, officers and men long to return to their nearby homes. When he makes but a shallow penetration into enemy territory, he is in frontier ground. Ground equally advantageous for the enemy or me to occupy is key ground. Ground equally accessible to both the enemy and me is communicating. This is level and extensive ground in which one may come and go, sufficient in extent for battle and to erect opposing fortifications. When a state is enclosed by 3 other states, its territory is focal. He who first gets control of it will gain the support of all under heaven. When the army has penetrated deep into hostile territory, leaving far behind many enemy cities and towns, it is in serious ground. This is ground difficult to return from. When the enemy traverses mountains, forests, precipitous country, or marches through defiles, marshlands, or swamps, or any place where the going is hard, it is in difficult ground, ground to which access is constricted, where the way out is tortuous, and where a small enemy force can strike. My larger one is called encircled. Here it is easy to lay ambushes, and one can be utterly defeated. Ground in which the army survives only if it fights with the courage of desperation is called death. Blocked by mountains to the front and rivers to the rear, with provisions exhausted. In this situation, it is advantageous to act speedily and dangerous to procrastinate. And therefore, do not fight in dispersive ground. Do not stop in the frontier borderlands. Do not attack an enemy who occupies key ground. In communicating ground, do not allow your formations to become separated. In focal ground, ally with neighboring states. In deep ground, plunder. In difficult ground, press on. In encircled ground, devise stratagems. In death ground, fight. In dispersive ground, I would unify the determination of the army. In frontier ground, I would keep my forces closely linked. On the march, the several units are connected. At halts, the camp and fortified posts are linked together. In key ground, I would hasten up my rear elements. What the verse means is that if the enemy, relying on superior numbers, comes to contest such ground, I use a large force to hasten into its rear. Someone has said that the phrase means to set out after the enemy and arrive before him. In communicating ground, I would pay strict attention to my defenses. In focal ground, I would strengthen my alliances. I reward my prospective allies with valuables and silks, and bind them with solemn covenants. I abide firmly by the treaties, and then my allies will certainly aid me. In serious ground, I would ensure a continuous flow of provisions. In difficult ground, I would press on over the roads. In encircled ground, I would block the points of access and egress. It is military doctrine that an encircling force must leave a gap to show the surrounded troops there is a way out, so that they will not be determined to fight to the death. Then, taking advantage of this, strike. Now, if I am in encircled ground, and the enemy opens a road in order to tempt my troops to take it, I close this means of escape, so that my officers and men will have a mind to fight to the death. In death ground, I could make it evident that there is no chance of survival, for it is the nature of soldiers to resist when surrounded, to fight to the death when there is no alternative, and when desperate to follow commands implicitly. The tactical variations appropriate to the 9 types of ground, the advantages of close or extended deployment, and the principles of human nature are matters the general must examine with the greatest care. Anciently, those described as skilled in war made it impossible for the enemy to unite his van and his rear, for his elements, both large and small, to mutually cooperate, for the ground troops to succor the poor, and for superiors and subordinates to support each other. When the enemy's forces were dispersed, they prevented him from assembling them. When concentrated, they threw him into confusion. Lay on many deceptive operations. Be seen in the west and march out of the east. Lure him in the north and strike in the south. Drive him crazy and bewilder him so that he disperses his forces in confusion. Take him unaware by surprise attacks where he is unprepared. Hit him suddenly with shock troops. They concentrated and moved when it was advantageous to do so. When not advantageous, they halted. Should one ask, how do I cope with the well-ordered enemy host about to attack me? I reply, seize something he cherishes, and he will conform to your desires. Speed is the essence of war. Take advantage of the enemy's unpreparedness. travel by unexpected routes, and strike him where he has no precautions. This summarizes the essential nature of war, and the ultimate in generalship. Here, Sun Tzu again explains that the one thing esteemed is divine swiftness. The general principles applicable to an invading force are that when you have penetrated deeply into hostile territory, your army is united, and the defender cannot overcome you. Plunder fertile country to supply the army with plentiful provisions. Pay heed to nourishing the troops. Do not unnecessarily fatigue them. Unite them in spirit. Conserve their strength. Make unfathomable plans for the movements of the army. Throw the troops into a position from which there is no escape, and even when faced with death they will not flee. For if prepared to die, what can they not achieve? Then officers and men together put forth their utmost efforts. In a desperate situation they fear nothing. When there is no way out they stand firm. Deep in a hostile land they are bound together. And there, when there is no alternative, they will engage the enemy in hand-to-hand combat. Thus, such troops need no encouragement to be vigilant. Without extorting their support, the general obtains it. Without inviting their affection, he gains it. Without demanding their trust, he wins it. My officers have no surplus of wealth, but not because they disdain worldly goods. They have no expectation of long life, but not because they dislike longevity. When officers and men care only for worldly riches, they will cherish life at all costs. On the day the army is ordered to march, the tears of those seated soak their lapels. The tears of those reclining course down their cheeks. All have made covenant with death. Before the day of battle, the order is issued. Today's affair depends upon this one stroke. The bodies of those who do not put their lives at stake will fertilize the fields and become carrion for the birds and beasts. But throw them into a situation where there is no escape, and they will display the immortal courage of Chuan Chu and Sao Kwai. Now the troops of those adept in war are used like the simultaneously responding snake of Mount Chang. When struck on the head, its tail attacks. When struck on the tail, its head attacks. When struck in the center, both head and tail attack. Should one ask, can troops be made capable of such instantaneous coordination? I reply, they can, for although men of Wu and Yu mutually hate one another, if together in a boat tossed by the wind, they would cooperate as the right hand does with the left. It is thus not sufficient to place one's reliance on hobbled horses or buried chariot wheels. To cultivate a uniform level of valor is the object of military administration, and it is by proper use of the ground that both shock and flexible forces are used to the best advantage. If one gains the advantage of the ground, then even weak and soft troops can conquer the enemy. How much more so if they are tough and strong? That both may be used effectively is because they are disposed in accordance with the conditions of the ground. It is the business of a general to be serene and inscrutable, impartial and self-controlled. If serene, he is not vexed. If inscrutable, unfathomable. If upright, not improper. If self-controlled, not confused. He should be capable of keeping his officers and men in ignorance of his plans. His troops may join him in rejoicing at the accomplishment, but they cannot join him in laying the plans. He prohibits superstitious practices, and so rids the army of doubts. Then, until the moment of death, there can be no troubles. Prohibit talk of omens and of supernatural portents. Rid plans of doubts and uncertainties. The Su Ma Fa says, exterminate superstitions. He changes his methods and alters his plans so that people have no knowledge of what he is doing. Courses of action previously followed and old plans previously executed must be altered. He alters his campsites and marches by devious routes, and thus makes it impossible for others to anticipate his purpose. To assemble the army and throw it into a desperate position is the business of the general. He leads the army deep into hostile territory and there releases the trigger. He burns his boats and smashes his cooking pots. He urges the army on as if driving a flock of sheep, now in one direction, now in another, and none knows where he is going. He fixes a date for rendezvous, and after the troops have met, cuts off their return route just as if he were removing a ladder from beneath them. One ignorant of the plans of neighboring states cannot prepare alliances in good time. If ignorant of conditions of mountains, forests, dangerous defiles, swamps, and marshes, he cannot conduct the march of an army. If he fails to make use of native guides, he cannot gain the advantages of the ground. A general, ignorant of even one of these three matters, is unfit to command the armies of a hegemonic king. These three matters have previously been elaborated. The reason Sun Tzu returns to the subject is that he strongly disapproved of those unable to employ troops properly. Now, when a hegemonic king attacks a powerful state, he makes it impossible for the enemy to concentrate. He overawes the enemy and prevents his allies from joining him. In attacking a great state, if you can divide your enemy's forces, your strength will be more than sufficient. It follows that he does not contend against powerful combinations, nor does he foster the power of other states. He relies for the attainment of his aims on his ability to overawe his opponents, and so he can take the enemy's cities and overthrow the enemy's state. By hegemonic king is meant one who does not ally with the feudal lords. He breaks up the alliances of all under heaven and snatches the position of authority. He uses prestige and virtue to attain his ends. The verse says, if one neither covenants for the help of neighbors nor develops plans based on expediency, but in furtherance of his personal aims, relies only on his own military strength to overawe the enemy country, then his own cities can be captured and his own state overthrown. Bestow rewards without respect to customary practice. Publish orders without respect to precedent. Thus you may employ the entire army as you would one man. If the code respecting rewards and punishments is clear and speedily applied, then you may use the many as you do the few. Set the troops to their tasks without imparting your designs. Use them to gain advantage without revealing the dangers involved. Throw them into a perilous situation, and they survive. Put them in death ground, and they will live. For when the army is placed in such a situation, it can snatch victory from defeat. Now the crux of military operations lies in the pretense of accommodating oneself to the designs of the enemy. Concentrate your forces against the enemy, and from a distance of 1,000 li you can kill his general. This is described as the ability to attain one's aim in an artful and ingenious manner. On the day the policy to attack is put into effect, close the passes, rescind the passports, have no further intercourse with the enemy's envoys, and exhort the temple council to execute the plans. When the enemy presents an opportunity, speedily take advantage of it. Anticipate him in seizing something like he values, and move in accordance with the date secretly fixed. The doctrine of war is to follow the enemy's situation in order to decide on battle. Therefore, at first be shy as a maiden. When the enemy gives you an opening, be swift as a hare, and he will be unable to withstand you. End of chapter 11. Chapter 12. Attack by fire. Sun Tzu said, there are 5 methods of attacking with fire. The first is to burn personnel, the second to burn stores, the third to burn equipment, the fourth to burn arsenals, and the fifth to use incendiary missiles. To use fire, some medium must be relied upon. Rely upon traitors among the enemy. All fire attacks depend on weather conditions. Equipment for setting fires must always be at hand. Implements and combustible materials should be prepared beforehand. There are suitable times and appropriate days on which to raise fires. Times means when the weather is scorching hot. Days means when the moon is in Sagittarius, Alphavarats, Eye, or Chin constellations, for these are days of rising winds. Now, in fire attacks, one must respond to the changing situation. When fire breaks out in the enemy's camp, immediately coordinate your action from without. But if his troops remain calm, bide your time and do not attack. When the fire reaches its height, follow up if you can. If you cannot do so, wait. If you can raise fires outside the enemy camp, it is not necessary to wait until they are started inside. Set fires at suitable times. When fires are raised up wind, do not attack from downwind. When the wind blows during the day, it will die down at night. Now the army must know the 5 different fire attack situations and be constantly vigilant. Those who use fire to assist their attacks are intelligent. Those who use inundations are powerful. Water can isolate an enemy, but cannot destroy his supplies or equipment. Now to win battles and take your objectives, but to fail to exploit these achievements is ominous and may be described as wasteful delay. And therefore it is said that enlightened rulers deliberate upon the plans, and good generals execute them. If not in the interests of the state, do not act. If you cannot succeed, do not use troops. If you are not in danger, do not fight. A sovereign cannot raise an army because he is enraged, nor can a general fight because he is resentful. For while an angered man may again be happy, and a resentful man again be pleased, a state that has perished cannot be restored, nor can the dead be brought back to life. Therefore, the enlightened ruler is prudent, and the good general is warned against rash action. Thus the state is kept secure, and the army preserved. End of chapter 12. Chapter 13. Employment of Secret Agents. Sun Tzu said, "Now when an army of 100,000 is raised and dispatched on a distant campaign, the expenses borne by the people together with the disbursements of the treasury will amount to 1,000 pieces of gold daily. There will be continuous commotion both at home and abroad. People will be exhausted by the requirements of transport, and the affairs of 700,000 households will be disrupted." Anciently, 8 families comprised a community. When one family sent a man to the army, the remaining 7 contributed to its support. Thus, when an army of 100,000 was raised, those unable to attend fully to their own plowing and sowing amounted to 700,000 households. One who confronts his enemy for many years in order to struggle for victory in a decisive battle, yet who, because he begrudges rank, honors, and a few hundred pieces of gold, remains ignorant of his enemy's situation, is completely devoid of humanity. Such a man is no general, no support to his sovereign, no master of victory. Now the reason the enlightened prince and the wise general conquer the enemy whenever they move, and their achievements surpass those of ordinary men, is foreknowledge. The section in the Rights of Chow entitled Military Officers names the Director of National Espionage. This officer probably directed secret operations in other countries. What is called foreknowledge cannot be elicited from spirits, nor from gods, nor by analogy with past events, nor from calculations. It must be obtained from men who know the enemy's situation. Now there are 5 sorts of secret agents to be employed. These are native, inside, doubled, expendable, and living. When these 5 types of agents are all working simultaneously, and none knows their method of operation, they are called the divine skein, and are the treasure of a sovereign. Native agents are those of the enemy's country, people, whom we employ. Inside agents are enemy officials, whom we employ. Among the official class there are worthy men who have been deprived of office. Others who have committed errors have been punished. There are sycophants and minions who are covetous of wealth. There are those who wrongly remain long in lowly office, those who have not obtained responsible positions, and those whose sole desire is to take advantage of times of trouble to extend the scope of their own abilities. There are those who are two-faced, changeable, and deceitful, and who are always sitting on the fence. As far as all such are concerned, you can secretly inquire after their welfare. Reward them liberally with gold and silk, and so tie them to you. Then you may rely on them to seek out the real facts of the situation in their country, and to ascertain its plans directed against you. They can as well create cleavages between the sovereign and his ministers, so that these are not in harmonious accord. Doubled agents are enemy spies whom we employ. When the enemy sends spies to pry into my accomplishments, or lack of them, I bribe them lavishly, turn them around, and make them my agents. Expendable agents are those of our own spies who are deliberately given fabricated information. We leak information which is actually false and allow our own agents to learn it. When these agents operating in enemy territory are taken by him, they are certain to report this false information. The enemy will believe it and make preparations accordingly. But our actions will of course not accord with this, and the enemy will put the spies to death. In our dynasty, Chief of Staff Tzu once pardoned a condemned man, whom he then disguised as a monk, and caused to swallow a ball of wax and enter Tangut. When the false monk arrived, he was imprisoned. The monk told his captors about the ball of wax, and soon discharged it in a stool. When the ball was opened, the Tanguts read a letter transmitted by Chief of Staff Tzu to their director of strategic planning. The chieftain of the barbarians was enraged, put his minister to death, and executed the spy monk. This is the idea. But expendable agents are not confined to only one use. Sometimes I send agents to the enemy to make a covenant of peace, and then I attack. Living agents are those who return with information. We select men who are clever, talented, wise, and able to gain access to those of the enemy who are intimate with the sovereign and members of the nobility. Thus they are able to observe the enemy's movements and to learn of his doings and his plans. Having learned the true state of affairs, they return and tell us. Therefore, they are called living agents. These are people who can come and go, communicate reports, as living spies must recruit men who are intelligent but appear to be stupid, who seem to be dull but are strong in heart, men who are agile, vigorous, hardy, and brave, well versed in lowly matters, and able to endure hunger, cold, filth, and humiliation. Of all those in the army close to the commander, none is more intimate than the secret agent. Of all rewards, none more liberal than those given to secret agents. Of all matters, none is more confidential than those relating to secret operations. Secret agents receive their instructions within the tent of the general, and are intimate and close to him. These are mouth-to-ear matters. He who is not sage and wise, humane and just, cannot use secret agents, and he who is not delicate and subtle cannot get the truth out of them. The first essential is to estimate the character of the spy to determine if he is sincere, truthful, and really intelligent. Afterwards, he can be employed. Among agents, there are some whose only interest is in acquiring wealth without obtaining the true situation of the enemy, and only meet my requirements with empty words. In such a case, I must be deep and subtle. Then I can assess the truth or falsity of the spy's statements and discriminate between what is substantial and what is not. Take precautions against the spy having been turned around. Delicate indeed, truly delicate. There is no place where espionage is not used. If plans relating to secret operations are prematurely divulged, the agent and all those to whom he spoke of them shall be put to death. They may be killed in order to stop their mouths and prevent the enemy hearing. Generally, in the case of armies, you wish to strike, cities you wish to attack, and people you wish to assassinate, you must know the names of the garrison commander, the staff officers, the ushers, gatekeepers, and the bodyguards. You must instruct your agents to inquire into these matters in minute detail. If you wish to conduct offensive war, you must know the men employed by the enemy. Are they wise or stupid, clever or clumsy? Having assessed their qualities, you prepare appropriate measures. When the king of Han sent Han Sen, Cao Sun, and Kan Ying to attack Wei Pao, he asked, "Who is the commander-in-chief of Wei?" The reply was, "Po Chi." The king said, "His mouth still smells of his mother's milk. He cannot equal Han Sen. Who is the cavalry commander?" The reply was, "Feng Qing." The king said, "He is the son of General Feng Wu Qi of China. Although worthy, he is not the equal of Kuan Yin." And who is the infantry commander? The reply was, "Hai Seng To." The king said, "He is no match for Cao San, and I have nothing to worry about." It is essential to seek out enemy agents who have come to conduct espionage against you, and to bribe them to serve you. Give them instructions and care for them. Thus doubled agents are recruited and used. It is by means of the doubled agent that native and inside agents can be recruited and employed. This is because the doubled agent knows of his own countrymen who are covetous, as well as those officials who have been remiss in office. These we can tempt into our service. And it is by this means that the expendable agent, armed with false information, can be sent to convey it to the enemy. It is because doubled agents know in what respects the enemy can be deceived that expendable agents may be sent to convey false information. It is by this means, also, that living agents can be used at appropriate times. The sovereign must have full knowledge of the activities of the 5 sorts of agents. This knowledge must come from the doubled agents, and therefore it is mandatory that they be treated with the utmost liberality. Of old, the rise of Yen was due to Ai Chai, who formerly served the Haisea. The Chao came of power through Lu Yu, a servant of the Yen. Ai Chai was a minister of Haisea, who went over to the Yen. Lu Wang was a minister of Yen, who went over to the Chao. And therefore, only the enlightened sovereign and the worthy general who are able to use the most intelligent people as agents are certain to achieve great things. Secret operations are essential in war. Upon them, the army relies to make its every move. An army without secret agents is exactly like a man without eyes or ears. The end. Thank you, guys.